Who am I and what do I do? I am Meredith Gran. I'm a cartoonist. I am an occasional animator. I teach at the School of Visual Arts. Octopus Pie is a webcomic that I've been doing since 2007. It's an ongoing story, basically the journey through your 20s, unraveling the mysteries of what it means to be an adult. When I started Octopus Pie, I was 22. I just graduated from college a few months before. I definitely had an idea that I would do sort of a sitcom-y thing, but there were elements of my own life in there that definitely stand out. There was the conflict between roommates, knowing how to live with each other and respect their space. There were breakups and new relationships, and the assessing that I was doing of other people's relationships, wondering if I had my life figured out. And I think a lot of that stuff immediately made it into the comic, and it continued to reflect the questions that I was asking myself in my life. So the main character in the comic is Eve, and she's pretty cynical, somewhat humorless, a little bit directionless. She was sort of a loner towards the beginning, and now she's sort of surrounded herself with this group of friends that she has. Hannah is also a main character, somewhat of a supporting character, who becomes Eve's roommate against Eve's wishes. Hannah really likes to smoke pot. She's high all the time. She seems to have a very positive outlook on life. She's sort of the self-reliant one who has her own business. She considers herself a loyal friend, but also micromanages the friends that she has. Eve is kind of the straight man character in the beginning, and Hannah is sort of the id who does whatever she wants, and the two of them butt heads constantly. So on top of the main cast, there's sort of an ensemble cast to Octopus Pie. Hannah's boyfriend Marek is one of the largest supporting characters. We mostly see him through his wisdom and the way that he supports the other characters. Then we have Hannah's friend Marigold. She's sort of a little bit more confused about what it is she wants to be in life. And then there's Will, who is Hannah's drug dealer, and a romantic interest for Eve, who is often making her question what it is she actually wants in a relationship. When it comes to how I relate to the characters, in the beginning you probably could have cut right down the center between Eve and Hannah to find my personality. Depending on the story, I've channeled myself into just about every character now, where something they've experienced I've really felt very personally close to. But in trying to be honest, one of the things I try to do is present the side perhaps that's most similar to me as not necessarily the right side. It's impossible to think of a time looking back on my life where that was the truth. There was always more than one side of it. The comic has changed a lot. In the beginning, I think I was going for more of an episodic sitcom type story where everything would sort of revert to normal. I knew that there would be changes, but I didn't realize the way I would be changing would affect the comic so much. When you're 22, I don't think you really anticipate changing much more. You assume that you've really experienced everything at that point. When I started to change, I realized that the sort of story I was telling was not quite what I wanted to tell anymore. And I guess I could sustain that, but being that it's a webcomic, there's no rule that you need to. So it became more enjoyable for me, and it started to seem more obvious for me that I would age the characters, not directly with me, but maybe slightly behind me, so I could capture those moments that I'd already experienced and had a little bit of time to think about. So the conflicts the characters go through, more is asked of them, and they're kind of forced to grow in different ways based on what I've been experiencing. My influences of the time, I would say, were Ryan North, who does dinosaur comics, John Rosenberg, who did Goats, and Rich Stevens, who did Diesel Sweeties, and Jeff Rowland, who's doing a comic called Wigoo. I would hang out with these guys and see their offices and think this is their life, and their lives were built around the creation of these comics. And getting to know them made me really want that myself. I decided to do a webcomic because it was something I could start immediately. I knew if I was going to seek a publisher, if I was going to pitch it as a TV show or something like that, I would have to do a lot of work that would not be seen. This was a way to immediately begin the story. Octopus Pie to me, it's somewhat of a journal. I get a lot of personal catharsis out of writing it. It's sort of a way of connecting with other people for me. I definitely feel that sharing a lot of these experiences in a way that is made accessible and is a little funny and cute, and then receiving that connection back from people who've experienced the same thing is extremely therapeutic for me. So I feel that I've worked out a lot of my own life just by writing it down and presenting it to other people and hearing that feedback. So I would say that it's sort of like a therapist, an 800-page therapist. So it gives me a really wonderful feeling to have made public something that was in here before. It makes me feel like I'm not only benefiting myself, but having this conversation with other people. I think I'd like for people, when they read Octopus Pie, to see these stories as both heavy and incredibly light in terms of the problems that these characters face. They are things that I legitimately thought at some point in my life were the heaviest, most serious things that could possibly happen. In hindsight, maybe not so much, but in the moment, I believe that they're vital and that those stories ought to be told, and that the person who's experiencing them and reading this and identifying with it should be able to consider them in that way. So that even if the troubles in your 20s someday seem completely ridiculous to you, at some point you needed to go through that. I do hear from a lot of people who tell me that this comic is sort of a guide for them in their 20s, which is wonderful. I'm very glad to know that. It also presents a little bit of responsibility for me, that I could tell them absolute lies and maybe they would trust me. I've always wanted to end the comic at a certain point when I felt that my 20s were over. I don't want to bring the characters into the next stage of my life. I feel like they belong where they are right now. And I don't want to keep the comic going just for the sake of keeping it going. I will probably choose a new, cast of characters and a new format to tell the sort of stories that I'm interested in telling in my 30s. And since I've barely started to experience those, I don't know what those stories are going to be yet. But I'm actually very excited about that.
Thank you for watching Beyond the Longbox.
If you enjoyed the show and would like to see more, please hit subscribe and we'll continue to bring you the best in comics.
Worship me!